Good morning, everyone. It's Ed Thompson from Greensboro and Single Purpose Ministries. Thank you all for joining me today. Those of you have been faithful viewers and also faithful readers, since we have an e-blast that accompanies this Y-blast and is read before the Y-blast, and it all hopefully comes together each Tuesday morning. Welcome also to you new folks. You're catching wind. Perhaps somebody forwarded this to you and you said, hey, let me check this guy out a few weeks, and you stayed with us. Thank you so much. I want to talk today about a story that absolutely illustrates two things today, just keeping it short and to the point. Number one, it illustrates how the 7 L's work in relationships, and particularly one relationship and event that I saw and attended on Sunday. I'll get right back to it. Today's e-blast is the number 2 point. Does God do bad things to good people? The answers were astounding from gotquestions.org. That ministry listed the reasons why we often get so confused with that, but we must be ready to answer well, because so many people who don't know Jesus Christ are asking that very question. I would like to say I asked that question, and I'll bet you did too, somewhere along the line. So that and the 7 L's are the two foundations this morning that we're going to choose to work from. And so let me just list real quickly, over the past few months in this year, I've touched upon these L words, used them as foundations in relationships. I was talking about life itself and what a great foundation it is for you and I to have life between us and God through Jesus Christ, between us and one another. Don't you want a marriage to have life? Of course. And then I'm thinking too about, we talked about leading and leading people well, leading ourselves well. It leads to good relationships. And so we tied that L word in. And then I love this one, laughing. I asked the question, when was the last time you had a good, awesome, deep from the gut laugh? Well, the Bible does say a merry heart does good, like medicine. So there's a component there of just helping us in our physical realm. Now, we also have the learning. And who is a lifelong learner? I hope it's all of us, because there's so much to learn, and even learning about relationships are going to come in so very handy at the end of our lives, because that's what we remember, that's what we talk about, and that's who we want to see. Now, I'm going to keep going, because some people call me the connector. I connect people by linking them together. And folks, in just a minute, I'm going to tell you how I saw other connectors doing likewise on Sunday in that restaurant to serve and love on people. When they put them together, the people felt like they belonged. We'll get back to that in just a minute. We are going to finish up with 2 biggies, but they're all big because they intertwine. But listening is something I love to talk about. I'd like to say I'm improving in that area. Some people say I do listen well, and I'm learning to live up to that. Finally, 1 Corinthians 13, we discussed it about loving others. It's the perfect mark of love, because it comes from the Bible, because it takes the Holy Spirit to do so. And it's the way the Lord loved us, both when he was here and even now, when he's in heaven with his Father. Folks, the 7 L's. I witnessed in 75 people who entered that restaurant crushed, grieving, tears, sobbing. And I thought to myself, what can I do? And I thought to myself, Ed, you're hurting too bad yourself. How are you going to come out of that? In lies the story. For 3 hours, we were treated to different people standing up and talking about this young woman who all the people in there knew her because she had loved and served them in such a way they could not tell others about her. And it lifted our spirits so much that I sensed God working together for good, and people began to touch one another or hug one another in between the talks from people that stood up. They laughed and the connections happened. In other words, life was being born in there. And I saw it. I saw people's faces light up like a plant being watered. So without getting too dramatic, I just want to illustrate the fact God was at work. And this woman was celebrated, and we gave thanks to God for putting her on this earth and putting her in our lives. I've got my own story, and I stood up and told it. So folks, here we are talking about one event where people of all, as I said, types were hugging on one another, telling one another they loved each other. And you know what? It wasn't coming from the emotional. It was coming from the spiritual realm. And I've talked about that before. That's really where things happen in a spiritual way because God is there and was there in a mighty way. I do believe that people who don't believe in God sensed a difference in that 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock period. So I say all of that, and I encourage you just to think about places you've been where you've sensed him working together, where supposedly bad-looking things and sad-looking things were turning into joyous things. That's who he is. And I'll finish up today with a man most of you know. Excuse me. His name is C.S. Lewis. He's written a lot of Christian books. He's a theologian of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, last century. He's had a great mind, and he wrote great books. You may want to look up Mere Christianity sometime. But I'm going to pull one quote out today and comment on it relative to the celebration we had on Sunday. I'll just go ahead and read it. It pertains to a great God who, if he does do what looks to be a bad thing, he's got a beautiful purpose for it. Here's what C.S. Lewis comments. He says, God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks to us in our conscience, but he shouts in our pain. God is the megaphone that rouses a deaf world. And it's so true. Let me just apply it to yesterday. He was whispering to me, Ed, can you see what's going on here? And I kept saying, Lord, your name is being exalted. Yes, I can see it. And her name was being honored. Yes, I can hear it. And yes, he does shout in our pain. I want to tell you one quick story. I ran to the restroom, and lo and behold, with 75 people outside in the restaurant, her husband walks in, and he looks at me, and I knew him. And I hugged him, and I said, I can't say anything. He says, you don't have to. He stood back, and he said to me, Ed, I got baptized last Sunday, i.e. 1 week ago. She passed, as I said, on Wednesday. I don't know the details, and I didn't ask. But here's what he looked at me and said. She told me about you when you worked around her. Hence, I worked with her. And he says, I'd kind of like to, I know what you do. I'd kind of like to give you a call if I could. And I said, Matt, I'm already writing the number down. and I'm here when you want to call me. And I absolutely thought to myself, what are the chances of the two of us being in that restroom together, talking about getting together soon? Oh my, I'm shouting for joy. And you know what? I wasn't even going to share that. That's not on my notes this morning, but I just wanted to share that to say a good God who has greater plans for the future and will continue to work things together for good. I'm stopping now, letting C.S. Lewis do his thing and saying, thank you for joining me. God bless you. Think about this, and I'll gladly see you next week, Lord willing, and you take care. See ya.